Okay, I'm going to show you some quick tips on Liquify and a couple other really interesting tools. So I'm going to open up the file in Bridge, and I'm going to double click on Model on the dark background and simply open in Photoshop. So you just open the image you want to retouch. This one's called Model on Dark Background.jpg. You'll see it's a pretty straightforward picture of a blonde model with dark clothing, and we're going to use Liquify to adjust her face. But before we're going to do that, we're going to convert the layer to a smart object, and this will allow us to make an adjustment after we're finished if we don't like the way it looks. So once we hit OK, in a normal situation, Liquify would be permanent. But by making it a smart object, you can go back and reopen the Liquify menu and change things. So first thing we're going to do is we'll click on the background, and we're going to right click on it and convert it to a smart object. And you can tell it's a smart object by in the little corner, there's a little icon on her thumbnail. So Liquify is located under the menu bar under Filter here, or you can just simply press Command-Shift-X and it will open it up. On a PC, you hit Control-Shift-X. This will open up the Liquify menu, and there's tools along the left side here. And then there's several adjustment panels over here. There's Properties, Face Aware, Load Mesh, Show Mask, Brush Reconstruction options. So we're mainly going to deal with this middle one, Face Aware Liquify. So Liquify recognizes facial features like eyes, nose, mouth, jaw, as well as face height and face width. It automatically selects those areas and assigns them to different sliders in the Face Liquify adjustment panel. So it's easy to immediately begin making adjustments without having to paint any of those selections in like the previous versions of Photoshop. Let's start adjusting the eyes in the Face Aware Liquify adjustment panel. I'm going to make the eyes really large so you can see them. So it's easy for everybody to see these adjustments. Simply slide the eye size for each eye to the right, giving it a value of plus 100. So if you do 1, you'll see one eye. The eye gets bigger, and the other eye. And the eye height, we're going to do the same for the eye height. So here, she has now really big eyes. Below the eyes options are the options for adjusting the nose. Here you can adjust the height and width of the nose. I adjusted the nose height to plus 30. And the nose width to negative 100. So you can see how it adjusts. So now let's adjust her mouth. The next set of controls below the nose is the mouth. Let's try to make her smile a little bit. So I set the smile to plus 90. And there is a hint of a smile. And then many times models like thick, full lips. So let's adjust her upper lip to plus 100. See how I adjust her lip? And her lower lip to about negative 50. Because if you make it any bigger than that negative 50, it looks like she just got in a fight and her lip is really swollen. Just looks way too big. So instead of using the sliders all the time, you can use the face tool. And the face tool is also the A key. So this is the face tool right here. Or you can just simply press the A key. And then as you move the cursor over, you can make adjustments. So let's just make her face a little bit thinner. So I adjust her chin and her cheeks. So there's a quick tip. If you don't like these lines that are showing up on her face, you can scroll down and unclick Show Face Overlay, and that will make the lines go away. I'm just going to leave them active because it's easier. So let's adjust her forehead. Her forehead looks a little bit tall. So we're gonna go back to the actual Face Aware Liquify panel, and under Face, we're gonna set her forehead to -100. So you can see -100 looks much better. So again, you can use the face recognition tool to move parts on the face by clicking and dragging directly on the part you want to move. If you move the cursor over her nose, you'll see the lines that appear as anchor points. And you can pull it down a little bit or move it up. Now, another quick tip is if you want to see what the photo looked like originally, as opposed to what you have now, just simply hit the P key and you can see it's the original to what you've changed, and you can flip between the two. And if you try to make an adjustment while it's the original, it's going to give you a warning and let you know. So besides making automatic facial adjustments, another one of the most used tools is the forward warp tool, which is also the W key. So if you press the W key, it automatically selects the warp tool. This lets you move around your face around like the face is if it were liquefied, hence what the name applies. So the secret to using this effectively is to adjust your brush size so that it is small to what you're going to actually adjust. So if you click, you can actually move areas. So first you make your brush size the size area you want to move, and then make subtle movements, just nudging things around. You get better results than making very large strokes. So just nudge. If you need to quickly adjust your brush size, you can use the bracket keys on your keyboard. Another quick way on the Mac is to press and hold Option, Control, and go left and right. So I'm going to press Option, Control, left or right makes it bigger. On a PC, the way to do it is Alt, then right click and drag left and right. So typical things that you want to use the forward warp tool would be adjusting lips and eyebrows in small increments. And you can see I adjusted her lips so that they're a little bit more curvy. So when you're making big adjustments to one area, you run the risk of moving another area that you don't want to. Photoshop gives you the ability to freeze any part of the image you don't want to move. For example, if you're pushing in on the side of her face, you could freeze her nose so that it doesn't adjust. To freeze, you simply hit the F key, which is this tool here, and you paint the area you don't want to move. So when you're nudging things, it will not adjust those areas. So when you want to, when you're finished, you would just want to draw back over and remove the red mask, and that's using the thaw tool or the D key tool, which is the thaw, and you just simply thaw it out. You can see now her face is very thin. So when you're done with the Liquify, simply hit OK, and there you have the Liquify tool. So before and after. Now, because we made it a smart object, we can double click on Liquify and we can go in and rechange things. Make her eyes small now. And that's the Liquify tool. Okay, the next tool I want to show you is Lens Flare. So I want you to open up the folder back in Bridge, and there should be a photo called Fashion Shoot, and simply open that with Photoshop. And you should have this picture of a model. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a blank layer. So just click on Add Layer at the bottom of the Layers panel. Then I'm going to have you press D. And what D does is D makes the foreground color, sets the foreground color to black. And then I'm going to have you press Option Delete on a Mac, and that will set the layer to black. It'll fill it with black. On a PC, you use Alt Backspace. So you have a nice black layer. So the next thing I'm going to have you do is I'm going to convert this layer to a smart object so you can adjust the lens flare later on or reposition it however you want to do. So I'm going to have you right click on the layer and convert to a smart object. And again, it has that little icon in the bottom of the thumbnail. So now we're going to go under the filter down to render to lens flare. Now there are 4 different styles of lens flare based off a lens type, but the most common one we use is the 50 to 300 millimeter zoom. And just leave brightness at 100% and just click OK. And there you have lens flare. It's pretty easy. Now we have to merge this layer with the background layer. So we have to blend that. So we're going to change the blending from normal to screen. And there you have lens flare right there. Now, if you want to set this in a different location, let's say you don't want the lens flare to be there, you can simply click on the Move tool, hit the V key, and move it where you need to. So let's say the lens flare doesn't quite look right and you don't want it to be at that angle, or you want to change the different rings. Simply double click on the lens flare. It'll open this back up, and if you click on the little crosshair, you can actually change the direction of the lens flare. And then hit OK. And that's why I wanted you to make it a smart object so you can go and change it later on. So when you move the lens flare layer, if you go back to normal, you'll see there's a hard edge along the edge of this because we filled the layer and then we adjusted it and moved it over. And a lot of times, this photo you don't see it, but a lot of times you'll see this hard edge. So we need to now adjust this. So to prevent that hard edge, to get a little bit of softer edge, we simply click on the add mask layer. It'll add a mask to that layer, and we go up to the brush. I almost said toothbrush. The brush tool, or hit the B key, and then we just simply press X, and that sends your foreground color. Make sure your foreground color is set to black. And then just adjust it, making sure you don't hit any of the rings. And you can always tell that the foreground color is black because they're right there. So then simply go back to the blending mode and set it back to screen. And you're all set to save the image. So the next thing I want to show you is how to make a HDR image from a single JPEG image. We'll tone it so that it looks similar to an HDR. You can do it in Photoshop, but I'm going to show you in Camera Raw and some of the sliders and effects. And it's a real subtle effect, so it's not as drastic as the toning HDR option in Photoshop itself. So first of all, I'm going to have you open up the folder again in Bridge, and it should look a lot like this, where you have the images, and I'm going to have you right click on Forest Aerial and open in Camera Raw. And here you have kind of a bland forest aerial picture. There's not a lot of punch to it. It's pretty flat, and there's not a lot of saturation. So we're going to crank up the slider, the contrast, the shadows, and the clarity, and then we're going to dial back the highlights so it gives a little more of a dynamic range to the photo itself. So we'll open up the basic panel, and we will add 100 to contrast, negative 100 to highlights, and 100 to shadows, and 100 to clarity. And you can see already it's starting to pop and look a lot better. So let's tweak this individual photo a little bit. Let's play with the texture slider. So if you pull the texture slider to the 100 to plus 100, you see every little branch. And if you pull it the other way, it gets kind of dreamy, kind of flat. So I'm going to leave it probably at about negative 30. So it's not too super, it gives a little bit of softness to it. So the next adjustments I'm going to add is I'm going to add 20 points to vibrance and 20 points to saturation. And you can see the color is really starting to pop a lot better. So now that this looks a lot better, we're going to open this in Photoshop. So this is kind of somewhat of an HDR looking photo. You could add things like vignetting if you want. And vignetting is real simple. We just go down to Effects and Vignetting, and we start the vignetting. And then you can, once you hit past 0, you can click on it and you can change the vignetting. So if you want a little bit of vignetting, gets dark along the edges, you just add it. I wouldn't add more than maybe, say, probably 15. And then once you're done with that, I would hit open. Now it's going to open up in Photoshop. And there you have the image right there. Now, and this is a good candidate for the next step. We're going to sharpen this image. When you print something, you always need to sharpen it because it defines the edges and makes it easier for the printer, because printer has what you call dot gain, and the dot gain tends to blur something. So you need the colors separated a little bit. So we're going to use the high pass sharpening technique. So we're going to hit Command J or Control J on a PC. And what this will do is this will duplicate the background layer. And we're going to change the name real quick to sharpening, just so we know to keep it straight. And the next thing we want to do is, because we want to be able to adjust this later on, you don't necessarily have to do this, but it's good practice, is we're going to make this a smart object. Because then we can go in, anything we apply to it, we can change it later on. So then go under Filter to Other, to High Pass. And what this is going to do is this is going to bring a high pass filter out. So I notice I immediately put the radius at the lowest setting, which is 0.01. Now, what we need to do, and every photograph is different, you need to slowly drag this back, and as you drag it, you'll notice details start to emerge. Okay, what you want to do is, as you slowly drag it, you want to wait for the color to start popping through. And you see there's a little bit of green here, and the green is starting to pop through. I'm going to simply hit OK. Now we can go back and change this because it's a smart object. You simply double click on the high pass filter and change it again. So this will allow us to sharpen the image. So now we need to blend the sharpening layer and the background layer. So there's 3 different ways you can do this. For medium sharpening, we simply select in the blend mode, soft light. That's medium sharpening. For heavy sharpening, we choose overlay. And for just incredible, insane amount of sharpening, we use hard light. So I'm going to use hard light because we can always dial it back in a number of different ways. So one of the ways is you can take the opacity and make it less if you need to. I'm going to keep it at real high just for the sake for you being able to see this. So this would be sharpening a photo, and then you could print it and it will look really nice. Now let's say you want to not sharpen the whole thing. There's certain areas you don't want to sharpen. So we're just going to create a mask. So if we press Option and click on Add Mask, now on a PC you would hit Alt and then click on Add Mask. What it does is it will make a black mask, so the sharpening layer is completely hidden by the black mask. And then you have to make sure that your foreground color is set to white. And to do that, if you hit the X key, you can see that it flips between the two. And just make sure that white is on the top right here. And then just make sure that the mask is selected in the panel, and let's make the brush big. And what you do is anywhere you paint, it will be a lot sharper. So what it's doing is, you can see in the mask here, it's taking the mask away. So anything where that's black is definitely not sharpened. So then this will allow you just to sharpen certain points of the photo. So that's how you sharpen a photo and get a image that's similar to an HDR look. And you can just then save the image once you're done.